Hey guys, do you want to know how to avoid anxiety in all the best ways possible? Well, before I go into that and tell you all those secrets, please subscribe to the channel, let us know what you think. And I want to go into this topic because this is, I think, one of my fortes with working in one to one phone calls because I was, I was there for many years myself where I essentially became an expert on how to avoid anxiety and to not feel triggered, right? And I was living in a very, very avoidant kind of format in my life. And when I'm speaking to people, I can look at their life, their habits, and also just the tone of their voice, and I can see how much they don't want to face anxiety or they don't want to feel anxious. And it really gives me very clear clues as to where the little corners and their little subtle compulsions are happening, where they are living in this format of I need to avoid anxiety and I don't want to be in situations where I will feel anxious, even just a little bit. Not even in a chronic way, but even just a little bit. I don't want to experience it. And your that premise sets us up for absolute failure because like anxiety is going to be an inevitable part of our life. You don't have to have chronic anxiety for the rest of your life, but anxiety itself will be an inevitable part of your life. And there's not much you can do and achieve in life in many ways without anxiety being a part of it. Think about like going on a first date, right? You're naturally going to be nervous and you're going to be anxious, and that anxiety and nerves is also going to be the reason why you're going to try and be on your best behavior, and you're going to try and like put effort into the date and thought into the date and would want it to go well. Again, not talking about chronic anxiety right now, but in general that is what people are experiencing in situations like that. Now, when it comes to chronic anxiety, of course, the brain takes over, and it feels like it's completely impossible to function in an actually good, productive way. However, your brain has been hijacked by OCD, and it's making every tiny little instance of nervousness blown up into this gigantic problem that you think that can't be overcome. A lot of the times when I, for example, do push people to do things that makes them anxious, such as starting to date again, initially, of course, the nerves are just like skyrocketing. But like as the evening goes by, not saying that the nerves completely go away, but they become far more dealable with in terms of your symptoms. It feels far more approachable, and it seems like okay, you at least are able to adapt to it and just like go situation by situation with like every conversation that you're having on that date, right? So I don't know why dating has just become this like example in this, but I mean that's the first one that came to mind. Um, and so you really have to peel through the layers and walk through that fire. In this case, in order to really like come to a level of okay, anxiety is actually not that bad, even if I feel it in important moments like going on dates with someone. But when we are in this mindset of I need to avoid anxiety at all times, of course you are going to make it out to be far worse than it actually is. And when you do come in situations where you're feeling anxious, then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because then you're like, oh, see, I knew I was going to feel anxious and I am feeling anxious. Therefore, my avoidance of it is completely justified and it's completely right. And then we go into hiding and then we don't go like do things that make us anxious for a very long time again. And in that time period where we're avoiding things, then the fear in ourselves about that particular situation gets reinforced even more. It's like when I had to do exposures, which I really did not want to do, I would do an exposure and then I would completely avoid it for the next 2 months. And in that 2 month period, that exposure I had done and overcome would feel scary again. Because with OCD, the fear kind of grows back. It's like a tumor. It will grow back and it will come back and take over your life, right? And when you come back to that exposure, it's going to feel just as hard to do than it did the first time that you did it. So the consistency and then you facing that anxious situation is so important because that's how your brain consistently learns. Again, if you're someone who, let's say, has just learned to drive and you drive only once and then for 2 months you don't drive again and then you drive again, you're not going to build that momentum and confidence in going on the road or driving in traffic or driving on the highway and things like that. So you have to be able to consistently drive in order to build that confidence in yourself that you can do that. I think a lot of the advice around anxiety online and on the internet is just around, and I think society has been, this is just my personal observation, I personally feel like society has been living on this premise for the last several years that whatever makes you feel anxious needs to be cut out of your life. Whether it's your family members, whether it's situations, whether it's a job, whether it's some task, whether it's a relationship, it needs to be cut out of your life. And I think people, even without OCD, I feel like have taken it to quite extremes as well, because then anything that feels even mildly triggering then feels like this is something to be avoided. We see statements like, if it makes you feel anxious, you need to move away from it. If it doesn't feel right, then it's not for you. If your body is telling you that this is something not good for you, you need to listen to your body. Like we're surrounded by all these kinds of statements, and people are, and especially in relationship OCD, I feel like this is like this entire notion is really heightened, that if it feels wrong, then it must be wrong. If it doesn't feel right, if it feels like that in your body, then you have to either fix it or you have to then leave the relationship. And with OCD sufferers, because we are irrational people, and because we exaggerate and catastrophize everything, and we take everything to like the absolute extreme last degree, you're then not going to be applying that principle on just one area of your life. You're most likely going to be applying it to all aspects of your life. Again, my main themes were contamination OCD, relationship OCD, real event OCD. However, at the same time, I was also doing that with tiny little other things that were not related to these big themes as well. Because in my mind, I felt like if something was anxiety inducing, it either needed to be fixed or it needed to be extinguished. I think one of the best books for me for this particular notion was At Last to Life by Paul David, which is on our reading list. I think that book completely really changed the way I viewed anxiety and how I conceptualized it and how I was dealing with it, because I think it really highlighted the importance of not jumping into immediate action as soon as you feel anxious. It explains that notion really well and goes into detail why that's so useful. And that helped me break that internal 24/7 cycle of analyzing my anxiety and just like analyzing my emotions all the time. Because I was stuck in this perpetual 24/7 ironclad cycle of analyzing my emotions, because I needed to know what I was feeling, why I was feeling it, what was the cause behind it, and how can I resolve it. So every single feeling was like me then putting a microscope to it and then being like, okay, what does this mean? Where is it coming from? I need to understand where it is. And that also caused me, as a result of it, I was also then really stuck in the past. Even something that happened 10, 15 years earlier, I was fixating on that because I was constantly reminding myself of those events by looking at my present emotions and connecting them to the past. Oh, I'm feeling angered by this. Oh, I'm feeling angered by this because I experienced something like this when I was like 10 years old, right? And then I was going back to the past over and over again. And for me, it was like, if I can identify what I'm feeling, I know where it's coming from, I can be the one then in control of my emotions, and then no emotion will be hidden from me, nothing will be out of sight for me, and therefore I can make sure that nothing emotionally bad happens inside me. And I can then, like, for a bigger threat that's then mutating inside me emotionally, I can make sure I can be aware of that threat and immediately like nip it in the bud as soon as it's even starting to like just starting to take its root. It was literally that kind of microscopic and just that obsessive emotionally controlling kind of like mindset that I was in, because in my mind every single slight negative threat that showed up, even the slightest, it didn't even have to be chronic, It didn't even have to be anything super serious, even something mild. I needed to extinguish it. Oh, I had a tiring day. I need to recharge at the end of the night because if I don't recharge by tomorrow morning, it's going to snowball into something far worse. Oh, today someone said something to me that kind of like hurt my feelings. All right, I need to spend like a couple of hours ruminating about it, really psychoanalyzing it, and trying to find some closure and resolve inside myself about it. Because if I let it linger for longer, it will keep bothering me for the next few days, and then more things will pile up, and then it'll become even more overwhelming to deal with. So I need to try and extinguish the thread right here, right now. Like, even when I'm explaining it, I'm like, what was I doing to myself? And so you can see that, and in those moments, I didn't care about like I mean, I cared, but in the sense that I wasn't thinking that, oh, this doesn't matter because my actual fear is, this big contamination or relationship thing. I wasn't thinking that at all. In that moment, even that tiny mundane thing felt like something I absolutely had to deal with in in like very hands-on priority. I needed to deal with that because if I did not, then like something far worse would happen. What would that be? I don't know, but it would just be something far worse. It was just like very elusive kind of threat of like something will happen, right? um Essentially, I think I realized that what my two main core fears were that I would be miserable for the rest of my life, either because of depression or because of guilt and shame. So I'd be miserable, and for me, the other one was then feeling uncomfortable for the rest of my life, right? Which is where this analysis of anxiety and then avoiding anxiety at all times was coming into play, because I thought if I did not avoid it and if I did not extinguish the threat, if I did not resolve things, negative emotions, if I don't resolve my negative emotions in the moment, right there and then, I would, I'm risking me feeling uncomfortable emotionally, physically, mentally for the rest of my life. So it was this constant cycle of just like fighting, 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 which is why from the moment I woke up, that machinery, that internal machinery was on. By the way, I mean, to be honest, I've never been like a one of those sleepers that sleeps throughout the night from night till morning. Even now, I wake up multiple times in the night. That happens to me. And I mean, that doesn't bother me. That's not a fixation or a theme for me at all. But I remember those nights when I was really suffering with OCD as well, where I was, even when I would wake up in the middle of the night, even just for like 10 seconds of being awake and just like turning my side, that mental analysis was even there, even in those 10 seconds. Like my mind was still, and I would realize, I feel, because I would wake up and not necessarily feel super refreshed because I was still feeling tired. And I think at some point I also really realized as well that even while I'm asleep, my brain is essentially active in that analysis still. That's how it felt, at least. I mean, I'm sure, I'm sure that's exactly how it was, because it did not make sense otherwise for me to then just wake up and my mind still be quite, active in those mental compulsions and that mental analysis and rumination about different things. So I mean, I was in that cycle for so long, and then of course that internal cycle translated into me then trying to avoid anxiety and extinguish any kind of threats in my physical environment as well. And I lived on the premise that if something is making me anxious, then I need to avoid it. I can't be in it. I can't go towards it. I should not go towards it because it's a threat to my peace of mind. That was not me being accepting of negative thoughts, feelings, and sensations. That was me completely unaccepting of life itself and the inconveniences and discomforts that life brings. I was also being completely unaccepting of myself as well, because me being someone who is experiencing discomfort and is struggling, I did not want to accept that. I wanted to only have this notion of I'm someone who is well set, stable, no problems. always on top of things, always self aware, and n- I will act responsibly towards myself so much that I will never let anything bad happen to me. If I let something bad happen to me, I will never forgive myself. Right? So that's the complete opposite of acceptance, because that's me then trying to have some kind of like absolute iron grip over my life. And that was the entire catalyst of my OCD cycle. Whatever the theme was, this was the catalyst for all of it. And when I speak to people, I can literally hear them being stuck in that. And I'm just like, I know exactly where you are. You don't even need to tell me more. Stop right there. I know exactly what's happening. Um, so so then you have to expand when you're working with people in one-to-one calls. You also have to expand your view into their life as well a little bit, and just beyond their main theme you have to expand the view into their life a little bit as well, and see how they're operating on a daily basis too, to see where those where that thought process of avoiding anxiety and triggers is coming into play throughout their day. So something to really think about if you're stuck in that, which if you're watching this video then you probably are stuck in that cycle. Yeah, I mean, if you want help with that, I can definitely help you with that as well. But let us know what you think about this video. Let me know if you have any questions. Always happy to answer questions. And yeah, you can get out of this cycle. You don't have to be stuck forever. There's hope over here. Bye.